Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Guy L. Freer and Bob Price. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Why, hello, Gael.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you today?
I am just peachy.
Peachy.
Yeah, that's what I used to say in class all the time. When I was teaching, I was always tell the kids would ask me how I was, and I always would say I was just peachy, because it's one of those words that you could say and nobody really knows how you're feeling, because you could use it in different ways, because I'm just peachy, or I'm just peachy. And everybody was just like, we're not sure what you're doing there. So yeah, I'm just peachy.
Yeah, well, you don't say I'm just bananas.
No,
Yeah.
well, then you're crazy.
All right.
So
Who do we have here?
we have Barry Fansteel. I said it right.
Yes,
I'm
you
so
did.
proud of myself. He is a retired Lutheran minister, but is still active in the ministry. He graduated with a BA degree from Concordia Senior College, Fort Wayne, Indiana, in 1970, his major being biblical languages. He received his Master of Divinity degree from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis in 1974. He served churches in DeWitt, Arkansas, McMinney, Tennessee, Humboldt, Texas, and Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Since his retirement 10 years ago, he has served 2 rural congregations that no longer had their own full-time pastor. He is now in his 50th year in the ministry. Barry has always had a great interest in history, not only reading straight history, but he has been an avid reader of historical fiction for many years. Barry and his wife, Janine, had traveled quite extensively in all 50 states and in Europe. In addition to being married, Barry has twin daughters who are now adults, and he has 1 granddaughter. So, you started out as a Lutheran minister. What sparked your interest in the ministry?
Ooh, wow. I guess, well, there was a joke in the family. My oldest brother was going to be a doctor, and I figured I could either he needed somebody to bury his mistakes so he could, so I could be a mortician or a preacher, you know? No. You asked. I don't know, just something that was kind of always in there behind the scenes. I was raised in a very devout Christian Lutheran home, parochial school. Just a lot of things just sort of came together for me.
I saw that you were in Humboldt, Texas.
Humboldt, Texas. That's right. Not Humboldt.
I was in the spring.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Humboldt, Texas, same name as the old Humboldt Oil Company, now part of Exxon.
That's right.
Ah,
Yeah, I was there for 4 years. There's
In the 70s?
now 86 to 90.
I was there in the 70s.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And-
That was just good old country.
good old country.
Tomball
You and Tom
Oh,
Ball?
well,
Yeah.
I've never heard of
and
Humboldt.
chicken fried steak.
Outside of Houston.
I could, all right. Chicken fried steak never made sense to me,
I've never tried to
Never.
think it through.
because you've got chicken and you've got steak and it's fried, and you've got 2 different forms of meat there. Steak is steak, chicken is chicken.
Chicken has nothing to do with it.
So why is it called chicken fried steak?
I guess it just scratches up.
It's the batter. I don't, I, you know, I am from the Northeast.
You really are.
Chicken fried steak never made
Yeah.
sense. The only thing I will say is that my husband and I were talking this morning in the car, and we were talking, of course, talking about food.
Chicken fried steak?
No, but we were talking about chocolate gravy. And I will say that is,
Chocolate gravy.
yes, that is the coolest thing, that you can have chocolate for breakfast.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, that's all I'm saying. So,
You'd ruin a biscuit.
no, chocolate gravy is the coolest thing you can have for breakfast.
Okay.
Yeah, you have it on toast. That how let's get back to Barry, please. You're getting off topic. You're the one that's doing the off-topic thing today.
Oh,
Yes. How did your academic background shape your career?
Oh, my undergrad was very much liberal arts, along with, of course, the biblical studies, getting ready, because it was all preparatory for the seminary. But basically, the liberal arts, I really learned, I guess, I learned how to enjoy learning, and that was a breakthrough for me, and especially, I think, in terms of bringing history, theology, philosophy to get together into one.
And you also studied biblical languages.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. Back then, we studied 4 languages:
Which were?
Hebrew, Latin, Greek, and German. So the Greek for the New Testament, Hebrew for the Old Testament, Latin
For Latin.
theological Latin, and then German because of the heritage of the Lutheran Church coming out of Germany.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
what lessons, have you learned from 50 years in the ministry? How does that connect to your book? Tell us about your book too.
Well, background's everything for people, in terms of their history. I'll say everything, but so much of who a person is his or her history, family of origin, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in terms of the book, I was the last few years serving a small congregation outside of Cape Girardeau, and a lot of Germanic background there from an immigration that took place in the mid to late 1800s. And a lot of the folks are still there, and you go up to the cemetery and all the, German names. It's just kind of pick up because we're talking generation after generation of people,
Yeah, it's true. It's a German migration area.
Yeah,
really.
it really is. So anyway, and so somehow I got interested in their immigration. And then I think the thing that sparked me for the book was a tombstone in the cemetery with the names of 5 siblings who died within 2 weeks of each other back in 1920 of the Spanish flu.
Spanish flu?
Yeah. And that was 2 years after it started. And so here we are in the middle of the COVID thing, and then
Right.
that's going on and on and on. I thought there's got to be a book here somewhere, or story here anyway.
And the name of the book is?
Of Love and Loyalty. It's in subtitle An Immigrant's Journey. And it's basically the story that it's a made up story, but an awful lot of the historical context of a young man who at age 16, I think it was basically forced by his family when they immigrated from Bavaria and headed to Michigan, but they ended up coming to this area of Missouri and into this German community.
Did they drive BMWs?
No.
Oh.
John Deere.
Oh, John Deere. Yeah.
So anyway, that's how the thing started, and it hooked. So it kind of hooked into the immigration, and also, be honest with you, even though my roots are German for the most part, I really do not know much German history. And so that got me going into that whole question too, in terms of the background, et cetera, et cetera. So I really did a lot of digging, not so much into my German history, but into the whole aspect of German history when it was unified in the 1870s and et cetera from there. And all of what that was, and all the dynamics of what was involved in that, socially, economically, et cetera, that would precipitate immigrants coming to America.
That's interesting. I never thought about Germany being. I always thought of it as one country, but
I know.
you're right.
Yeah.
It
Well, it
was
started out as tribes.
like
Same
tribes.
thing,
Oh,
the
tribal.
same thing as in France. It
Yeah.
started out as tribes, and
well,
then they unified.
France is a tribe.
And then Napoleon had
Watch
his-
it there, Curly.
Then that Frenchman Napoleon had his way with them for a while.
Yeah.
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 And then when they overthrew him, they ended up in 26, 27 little,
Right. Little
you know,
fiefdoms.
fiefdoms. Yeah, right. But those go way back. I mean,
Right.
the royal line of Bavaria goes back 800 years, you know. So yeah.
Right.
And so, anyway,
Fascinating.
so I got into all that. I didn't really know any of that, you know, and it was exciting just because I just like history, and it was exciting. And so then out of that just came an idea, you know, and that's what evolved.
All right.
So you've had 50 years, and that's an awful long time to be in a career, because I was in teaching for 39, and that was a long time.
Mhm.
So what's your takeaway from your 50 years of being in the ministry?
Well, I think in terms of personal kind of growth, just trying to relate again, because I'm basically a people person, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the first few years of your ministry, you kind of figure out what you want to do, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then somewhere along the line, I kind of realized that with my proclivity toward people, I would never really serve large churches, you know, and that's okay, you know. And so to get settled into that, to get settled in terms of who I am, in terms of my own faith life, et cetera, et cetera. And so because I think I enjoy, for the most part, I enjoy the ministry. It was, I think, for me, the right place to be, you know. And so I continue to work it through.
Now you serve 2 rural congregations.
Yeah, right now it's only one.
Right now it's only
Mhm,
one.
mhm.
Okay. What's it like serving in a rural congregation as opposed to serving? Because now it's rural. So before that, you were in a city, or
I was in Cape Girardeau.
Okay.
itself.
What's
yeah.
the difference between the two?
Well, Cape,
Is there a difference?
well, yeah, the rural congregation.
I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know how,
Yeah.
what it would be.
Well, the first one's out, and I served it for 8 years. Just a couple of years ago, I gave it up. It was basically farming background. you know.
Okay.
Okay, farming background. And so that made it more difficult in a sense for me to write this book, bringing them into that area, because I knew virtually nothing about farming,
Right.
Personally. So I had to do a lot of digging into that. But just in terms of just the home folks, just
Mhm.
just that I don't want to say mentality, but just that their the way of thinking, the work ethic, et cetera, et cetera. Like so many of those folks down there. I mean, they can do anything because they've always done it, being raised on a farm. I think they can tear down anything, put it back together. They can build houses. They can, it's just a different.
Way
So
of
you
life.
started
Different way of
making
life.
dumplings too, and
Oh, they make them, but I don't. Hell, the church I serve out there,
Oh.
they have a big chicken dumpling dinner. Yeah, 2 of them.
What,
I
in
love
Kelso
chicken
or-
and
Yeah,
dumplings.
yeah.
I love
Yeah,
chicken
yeah.
and dumplings.
So-
That's another thing that I never had until I came to the Midwest was chicken and dumplings. I've never had chicken. I never had chicken and dumplings. I never had chocolate gravy. I never had.
a deprived
I
person
did.
in the Bronx.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, not Bronx. I was not in the Bronx. I was on Long Island.
Long
That's right.
Long
Island.
Island. There's a difference.
Long-
And people in the Bronx would be very insulted, and people in Long Island would be very insulted. You just don't mix the two. There's a difference.
No, there is a difference.
There is. Okay.
They're like two different cultures.
There is. You've also done a lot of traveling.
Yes.
Okay. So
Mhm.
has that influenced your ministry?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Especially, oh, yeah. We've enjoyed traveling. My wife had to break me in because at first I wasn't much of a traveler, but after we really have enjoyed traveling in terms of the history, in terms of the scenery, of course, in the U.S., the culture, etc.
How did that impact your ministry?
Well, I've been to Israel 3
Mhm.
times. I didn't think I don't think, and that certainly has had an impact on Israel and Egypt because of the biblical background. But just in terms of giving me horizons, I think, so that I can incorporate it into messages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you said one thing that I paid attention to was the love of learning.
Mhm.
And that's like a lifelong
It really is.
thing.
It really is.
Mhm.
And that's why I think that after I retired, the history, that has then, become just pretty important to me. The
Well-
history of the German, people.
Is how did you get drawn into the historical fiction, as a reader?
Oh, and to read, historical feature. Oh boy, I don't know. Because I think it is that desire to understand the historical background, but also in a way that can make it entertaining through a story.
Ah, gotcha.
It's not just a dry history, even though, so that is. I
How
think
did you
probably
develop your characters for your book?
slowly?
Painfully.
Painfully.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Well, are you
Right.
free? Or did you do your outline? Did you plot it out, or did you do free writing?
I just kind of worked it through. I went. It's a book of about 80,000 words. I probably wrote 400,000 words.
Wow.
I don't know. That's maybe an exaggeration, but an awful lot of rabbit trails, et cetera, et cetera. The rabbit trails, of course, I've always gone down rabbit trails. I call them rabbit trails, just in theology or, in Bible study or whatever. I just
Well,
like to
I'm
go
always down rabbit holes. so-
Well, maybe that's what they
Yeah.
are, So I go down the rabbit trail until they hit a dead end, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But
Did you do like character charts or?
no, I had in mind that I wanted to incorporate the tombstone. Okay.
Okay.
And I wanted to.
That's what inspired you.
Yeah, right.
That was your
initially. And I also
inspiration.
wanted to incorporate the immigrants,
The immigrant aspect.
the whole German immigration, especially. And what got me going
So
on
that took you
was-
a lot of research.
I do a lot of research, absolutely. Just incredible amount of research for me because I really did not know it. And also, it then spilled into the First World War.
Right.
And then I realized I knew very little about the First World War. I think probably many people today know very little about the First World War.
That's one of the.
And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book.
right.
Because,
That's one of the most underwritten wars, especially in historical fiction.
right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Right.
It's-
I can see
It
that.
really is.
Mhm, mhm.
Historically, we know a lot about it, and we can do the research. But when you look for historical fiction books, there's a lot in Second World War. You can find chock full of books written during the Second World War. But when you look at historical fiction for First World War, there's not as
Well,
much.
it wasn't as long, I suppose. And
But there isn't
Well,
as much.
no.
There really isn't.
Well,
It wasn't as
there's more out there than
romanticized.
what I thought. There is more, and
Yeah.
I think it's had sort of a resurgence. It seems lately too, to some extent. But Second World War just overshadowed it.
Yes, it does.
And
Yeah.
America didn't get into got into both wars late, but America's involvement in World War One was only what, 18 months or so,
Right.
you know, but it'd been going on for over 3 years by that point.
Right.
So,
That's part that I would venture to say that's got to be part of it,
mhm.
but it's not as romanticized as World War II.
There's nothing very
is.
romantic about First World War.
No, there
It's
really
just, it was
isn't.
slaughter, you know.
It was, yeah, really. It really was just a simple
There were
slaughter.
no knights at the round table.
No, there weren't.
Okay.
It was a slaughter,
It was,
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so your love of history
Okay.
drew you to the historical fiction,
Okay.
hence the book.
Okay, and then the main character, I guess you could say, his sort of, he didn't want to immigrate because he left a girlfriend behind. Okay, you know, but then the development of his own faith story, as he was dealing with the philosophy and the theology of Germany, you know, 19th century Germany, and its view, and then the very progressive view of mankind that it can accomplish anything, and look what we can do, and we develop these wonderful weapons, so now we got to see how well they work, you know, all of that. It's pretty, you know, but yet it's sort of a political issue today. But you know, I think we're living in a very similar kind of age today, you know, and I'm thinking, well, there's probably a drawback to that, you know, a negative side of that story.
Well, how did you incorporate your ministry then into your book?
Through the theological kind of questions and struggles that he was having, especially over against the view of mankind. Is man basically good or what, you know? And so, because he himself goes through that whole, what's the word I want? Progression.
So what's the question?
yeah.
Now what's the question that your main character is going to ask?
About the
your main
nature
character?
of man, about the nature of man,
Okay.
and about the reality of God, because so much of what was being said philosophically of that day and age was basically nihilism and atheism, you know.
Mm-hmm,
And so, and he got hooked into that, you know.
mm-hmm.
And so, but he never really felt comfortable there, and he continued to struggle with this until basically, you know, they had the World's Fair here in St. Louis. That's there, you know, and the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904
Mm-hmm.
was all about the progress of mankind, you know,
Right.
and et cetera, et cetera. But then the war, and then the build up for the war, and then the war broke out, and then I have him go back to France
Right.
to be an interpreter of German
yes.
prisoners of war. You know?
Right.
Wow.
So I get him back over in France
Right.
because he could speak the language, et cetera, et cetera. Et cetera.
Right. He can
Yeah.
speak German.
Yeah.
Right.
And also the ostracism of the German community here in America. You know,
Right.
I mean, German at one time was the number one language taught other than English. You know,
But then when
First
we
World War just
took it out,
It took it, you know, really.
it
brought
just
to
took it out.
to an end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was all very interesting, and so I try to incorporate some of that into the stories too to tell. Yeah, but basically, the philosophically, I guess, would be the question of the nature of man and his own personal life
Struggles.
with finding God, etc. You know, and in the end, he does get it all resolved.
So
But it was through the anguish of him going back and seeing the war, you know,
the physical seeing
the
of the
slaughter,
war,
you know,
the
and
slaughter of the war.
you know.
Right. The
Et cetera,
slaughter
et
of the
cetera.
physical war.
Mhm.
Right.
Did he ever find his old girlfriend?
Well, yes.
Really?
Well, no, he found. Well, all right.
Well, now
Yes,
is he
when
going to give it
when
away?
it came to the when it came to the U.S., you know, having left her behind.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You know, he's pining for her, and his first rather significant faith struggle happened because she died over there
Oh wow.
of consumption, tuberculosis.
Oh,
And how in the world would
that's
God
right.
allow that
That's right.
that girl
To die.
And also, what
remember
had
that.
precipitated their immigration was that his older brother had been killed in the War of Unification in 1870, And so his parents, his father especially, said, I can't stay here anymore. I have to get away.
Right.
And so that was the precipitant of some of the faith
them
struggle
coming
that
to
he
the
was having.
States.
Yeah. And then it went from there.
All right.
Wow.
We are going to go. This is a perfect time to go to commercial break.
Whatever.
Right. And we will continue this conversation.
Is that like a crack?
Yes.
That's
We are
great.
at commercial.
In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090.
And we're back.
Well, you're listening to The Author's Edge with Guy L. Freer and Bob Price. That's me.
In case we didn't know.
Yeah, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 10 a.m. on KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM, and Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide, all 48 states. Well,
There's a couple more.
there's a couple more, but we don't reach them.
We don't?
On My Genre
We don't
Radio
reach them?
Network, you can also view
We'll talk to
our
Mark about
latest
that.
videos of past shows at authors-edge.com online and download valuable information on marketing and publishing. And so we're talking to Barry.
We are
Fansfield.
talking to Barry of Love and Loyalty, An Immigrant's Journey. Now, a brief overview of what you're currently working on in terms of the basic story. We have a quote. On the way back to our lodging, I can't stop thinking about that field of carnage we saw, where thousands of young men in the prime of their life died. I can't make the images go away. I can't simply ignore the question. It challenges all of my assumptions about the goodness of man. Can I say that man has progressed beyond the caves? We possess the brains and know how to achieve greatness, but the emotional wherewithal of a rattlesnake. This is pretty powerful.
Well, yeah,
Tell me about this.
that's sort of the climax of his, part of that process of the climax of his question about the nature of man and the place of God. After the war is over in France,
Right.
He then, in the story I have, he is then told he's going to stick around for the Versailles Paris peace talks. Okay. And so he and a man who has met during a break between the end of the war and the beginning of the peace talks, go out to a battlefield, that not far from Paris, and he's just shocked by the horrors of what he sees there, and because it was just, those battles were horrible,
Right.
no end.
Just bodies.
And so how man had used its know-how to do this,
Mm-hmm.
there's always that downside of our progress, and that we tend so often to resort to eventually,
Right.
And so this was getting to the climax of his evaluation decision about the goodness of man, and then, go ahead.
What inspired you to write this?
Well, okay. They always say everybody got a book in them, and I thought, well, and I think probably what precipitated this was in a way my own faith story, but also in a way my desire to understand the German heritage, like I said, I knew very little about it. And so put those two together, and that's what happened. In the story, I have basically three different kinds of faith stories developing. The simple faith of his sister, and she goes through some horrible stuff, too, but yet she can continually hang in there, seemingly without a doubt, And also to a certain extent, also the faith story of his wife, which is similar, but not quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
But then his own, which was kind of erratic,
Mm-hmm.
and all over the place. And so, and as he grappled with and tried to put it all together, where is God in this development of mankind? And so that was a lot of it. Yeah.
So Heinrich is a translator for the Allies, and he interrogates German POWs. How does Heinrich reconcile his dual loyalties? I mean, he's German,
Mm-hmm.
and he is interrogating Germans.
Mm-hmm.
How does he reconcile this?
It's hard. And then you have, he's struggling with that. But then he goes through the Versailles, the Paris peace talks,
Mm-hmm.
and the Treaty of Versailles, and the way the defeated powers were
They
treated.
hammered them.
Yeah. And it just set the stage for World War II, which I'm playing around with now a little bit
right.
on another book. But I think even now they're saying that really World War I and World War II is not one, it's really one war. It's kind of like the 20th century's 30 years war, in a very real sense. And so just set the stage for that. And so even the good guys who try to come up with justice, but even it ends up in unjust.
Is there true justice?
No, not as we see it, and not as we're capable of it.
Is God's relevance, challenged in Heinrich's perspective?
I'm sorry, what
Is God's relevance challenged?
Oh yeah, for Heinrich, yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yeah. He flirts with a little bit of Marxism, he flirts with the philosophical stuff that's coming out of Germany. Yeah. He's
What about the other characters, like his mother? How do they see the chaos that Heinrich experiences?
She's the old traditional German mom,
Cooking dumplings,
loyalty
huh?
to her husband, even though the last thing she wanted to do was immigrate, and she's the guiding light of the faith of the family. If you could, I didn't develop her as much as I probably should have, but she is a guiding light of the family. His father is sort of peripheral, in terms of his faith life. But
How does the Great War impact his worldview on Heinrich's worldview? How does he see the world?
I think a certain amount of ambivalence. I mean, like it says in that quote, he's capable of greatness. Man is capable of greatness,
Right.
But yet there's that flaw, that strain of rebellion, that strain of, how do you want to say it, evil, even evil, and the world stumbled into that war, and so much of it really was about technology, what it had accomplished, And
what
if it was
we
just
do
that
with it.
war, that's one thing. But today we're still living the after effects of that war
Yeah.
with the geopolitical reality today.
This is a pretty dark passage. And even when I was reading it and I was putting it together and I was putting all this together, I was looking at it, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna read this. It's pretty dark. So how do you reconcile your own faith with this? I mean, let me ask you this: is Heinrich you?
No, but yet there's certainly some shadows of me there,
Mm-hmm.
But I have not experienced
No,
the
you
struggle to the depth that he himself did.
Right.
At least,
So what do you think of this passage? I mean, you wrote this passage.
how would I?
How do you perceive this passage?
Just that, again, that tragic ambivalence of human nature,
Mm-hmm.
And then, though, that in spite of that, as a Lutheran Christian pastor, I don't know which order you put that all in, but a Christian Lutheran pastor, that in spite of it, God's love, for this broken world, and I finally resolved that with him at the end.
That you do.
With this visionary experience, that some have said, I don't understand it. And I understand that because it is kind of strange. But I got that idea from, like I said, I kind of developed this as I went. Catherine Porter, I believe was her name, was wrote from magazines back in the 40s and 50s. And anyway, she wrote a book entitled Pale Horse, Pale
Rider.
Right,
Catherine
right.
Porter. Yes.
And because she herself had Spanish flu,
Right.
and she had an experience of what, that basically out of body kind of experience.
Yes, I know her writings.
Yeah. And
Wow.
Carl Menninger, was researching this stuff in light of the Spanish flu. And I thought, I can play around with this. And that's how I came up with the idea of how he would find this reconciled, because it took, in his vision, he goes back to the horrors of a battlefield, an active battlefield,
Well, what lessons does Heinrich learn from this experience? And what do you think the message that you were trying to get across
To the reader.
to the reader?
That even when we doubt, even when we struggle, even in the midst of a crazy mixed up world, when we work through the whole God question, and I believe everybody has their own path that they're struggling through at times. That doubt is not a sin in and of itself. Doubt, I think someone said, is sort of the cutting edge of faith. And that faith develops through those times of doubt to a deeper and more mature kind of way for many people. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. I've also known a lot of people for whom it's never a question, and that's depicted in the faith story of his sister, especially.
Yes.
But my faith story has been more along the lines of Heinrich,
Well, writers are just filled with doubt.
Aren't they?
So-
I doubt I'd ever get that book written. But Greg Stout, who I know you all have had on here, he kind of encouraged me to keep going with it, you know.
Oh, I'm so glad you did.
And then also I was, when I was about trying to struggle with putting a chapter about the Civil War in the book as well, because, you know, that was aftermath. And never, I was about ready to give up, and I gave it to a couple of pastor friends and said, give me an honest opinion of this thing, you know, because it wasn't done. It was maybe 3/4 done, but yeah, but they both encouraged me to finish it. So I did. Yeah.
I'm so glad
Yeah.
you did. I
Yeah.
really am. Actually, that leads what you just said leads me to your next question was what were your major challenges in writing this book? Besides
Yeah.
finishing it.
Finishing it, yeah.
How long did it take you?
Let's see. I started beginning of COVID. 2020, probably about May of 2020. I started doing research basically, you know, and I finished it at the end of the year in 2021.
Okay. So
Got
it
it
took you
published.
almost
2 years?
2 years to
Well, a
do.
year and a half anyway.
year and a
right,
half.
Right. Yeah. And I published it in I think February of 2022.
You self-publish or?
I self-published because
Okay.
I didn't know how it would be worthy, you know, and I knew what it took to get things published.
Was
and
that
I
your
knew-
doubt thing?
I had, oh yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, I have to commend my wife. My wife also kept me focused. My wife kept me going on this because she loves historic fiction. So she kept reading it, you know, for me. And
Well,
said-
good
said-
for her.
Oh yeah, she kept
Bravo.
me going. You know, she really did. And so basically,
Your
what's the
biggest
question?
challenge was to keep going.
Keep going and to say, how's this thing going to get there? You know, how is he going to get this, his faith question resolved, you know, and how am I going to work in the Spanish flu? You know, so, you know, the tombstones, you know, at the beginning. And so, I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to get there, you know, and even at the end, there were some surprises to myself, you know, but,
Do you think this book is controversial?
it is I think it would be for the person who kind of thinks of the Christian life as sort of, I don't say one-dimensional, a person who has never verbalized at least some of the struggles. I did hear by way of the grapevine, one of my former members who read it said, I can't believe a pastor wrote this, you know, type of thing, you know. And it's like, that's interesting. You know, I didn't, you know.
That would be.
Huh?
That would be.
You know, it's like, you know, and so in that regard, maybe if you're looking for something that's not.
But I'm certain in your
Traditional.
ministry, you probably ran across this
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, sure. You know. But,
How might it help a reader?
well, I think it depends on what he wants to accomplish, what he wants to find out. If he wants to find out about World War I from the American side, especially the Western Front, I think it's very helpful, very, very thorough. The history that I have in there is absolutely accurate, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so from a historical point of view,
Yeah.
I think,
Mhm.
you know, maybe for grade school, high school or junior high, you know, to understand a little bit of that. For a person who wants to understand maybe the background of Europe back in that era, and also its continuing impact today. For a person who maybe wants to just look at the question of faith, you know, and to see how there are different directions it can go,
Well,
develop along the line.
do you consider this to be a religious or a Christian novel?
Now, from the start, I called it an edgy Christian novel. You know, edgy, meaning, you know, okay,
Mhm.
you know,
I got
it is, you know, certainly it's Christian, you know, but yet it's not not cookie cutter, basically.
Yeah. No, it's not cookie cutter.
So it's because I do
Well,
grapple with some of those.
you've done a fabulous job, really.
Oh, thank you.
It's a great read. Um,
What relevancy do you see in the book for today's age?
For one thing, to understand so much of what's going on in the 21st century.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you look at Israel today, you know, the breakup of the Ottoman. World War One, was the destruction of 4 empires.
Right.
The German Empire, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. And so the reconfiguration of the world that then in many ways led to World War II, and who got left out of the treaty process, namely the Japanese and the
Yes.
Germans,
Right.
And then you get
the two people who got
Right,
started
World
World War II.
War II, and they basically and the Italians, they got cut out too,
Right.
of the treaty process, and I think also then the Ottoman Empire with the division of the Mideast,
Right.
So now you have Iraq, Iran, so that's all coming out of the aftermath of World War One,
Right.
and then not even considering then the Jewish settlement,
Mhm.
that was going on, but then of course it accelerated so much after the Second World War.
Right.
But,
One of the quotes on the back of the novel is, "If man is the measure of all things, is God at best irrelevant?"
yeah,
Can you explain that?
well, because again, getting back to the philosophy of the progressivism that man is the essence of all things, that man can accomplish it, that we don't need God, there is no God, and so that's what Heinrich was struggling with, especially after he came to the St. Louis World's Fair. He said, "Wow, look,
Saw a light bulb?
look,
Yes.
huh?
He saw a light bulb.
Yeah,
So is God important?
is God important? Does he
Is
count?
God does he count?
Yeah.
Is he needed?
Is he needed? Are the philosophers,
Yeah. How does
are they right?
Yeah.
There is no God. There's no need of God. And
Yeah.
as
And how
Marx
does this
right,
question impact the traditional beliefs?
it's an emotional
Yeah.
need of people. Is that what it is?
Does God exist? That's the question. That's what Heinrich was looking for. He wants to know if God exists. And when you look at all the terrible things that
Mhm.
Heinrich
Mhm.
went through, he wants to know,
Yeah.
does he
And-
exist?
And the way I resolve it, is basically on the cross we see
Right.
where God is. And that's really ultimately where it happens. And I guess I gave away pretty much of the story, but I felt like I needed, if people are going to be listening to this, felt like I need at least throw that much in.
Yeah.
That
Well,
how does the
but you
cross?
see-
How does the cross reconcile?
right.
That aspect of man's proclivity for destruction, and also a sense of a love of God, and if God is God, why doesn't he do something? Is
Right,
he,
and that
is he all
question goes-
knowing? Is he all loving? Is he all powerful? How do you put all that together?
And how do you explain the horrible things in the world if God exists?
Mhm.
That's the question. So
Well, how does your novel influence your perspective or the reader's perspective on life?
I hope that the reader can identify with a lot of what's going on there, and maybe can identify with that journey of faith, especially for Heinrich, but that's to a lesser extent for his wife and also for his sister. And that's why on the book you have the 3 characters there, Heinrich in the middle, and then his wife and his sister. And
but
I
I'm
would hope that-
noticing that it's Heinrich, his wife, and his sister, not his father.
right.
Right.
Right. His father, yeah. I have to get him out of the way. In the
Yeah.
I have
his
to get him
father.
removed
Yeah.
because
And you would think that maybe the father would be a big part of that.
he was. Yeah,
But he's not really.
No, he's not. He basically serves
He's-
as the one who is hard-headed.
He's a conduit, but he's not an influencer.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
He's a conduit, but he's not an influencer. Whereas the mother and the sister are. which is an interesting thing with the
Why?
dynamics of the characters, because especially in a German household, fathers would be a little bit more. It's a patriarch,
Yeah, I mean,
and in this particular instance,
Well,
it's not.
It's kind of interesting. I think I relate to this in some instance where I was brought up in Arkansas. I mean, my grandparents were sharecroppers, and but it's always the woman that is like the strength of the household. I've always found that.
then that's how this is as well. She's also the
Yeah.
strength of the spiritual.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much traditional German,
Yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah.
And when they have the old expression "Kinderkook et Kirche," that she's take care of the kids, she cooks, and she take care of the spirit, the church, the Kirche.
Right.
So
However, it's the patriarch that brings home the bread, that brings home the money, that makes the household exist. So and he's the one that says what happens and what doesn't happen.
right, and so that's the reason they immigrate. I mean,
Right. And that's why they are where they are.
because he can't handle the death of his oldest son, who was the apple of his eye. Heinrich is not the apple of his eye,
Right.
And he can't. And so he said, "We're moving to America," even though it's a prosperous time in Germany at this
Right.
point.
And the other ironic thing about the whole thing is that if they had stayed in Germany, Heinrich would have been fighting on the German side.
And
That's another ironic thing about the whole thing.
and that's kind of, I'm playing around with that idea now.
Yeah. So you have another book coming.
Yes, it's a real struggle, but hopefully it's coming.
Writing is always painful.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so
But
what's the name of the new book?
I don't have a name right now. It's entitled Maria's Great Wars.
Maria's Great Wars,
Yeah.
multiple.
Multiple, yeah, because it's told from the perspective. It's being told from the perspective of a young woman who has a very nice little faith life,
Mm-hmm.
from over in Germany. Okay, and she's related by marriage 2 times removed to Heinrich. Okay.
Okay.
So people say, is it a sequel? I say, no, it's not really a sequel. Sort of, but it is a spinoff. In a
It's
way.
a spin-off
Yeah.
and a sequel.
And so she lives through the war as a German,
Oh, so it's a different perspective.
from a German perspective, from her perspective, and the horrors, from with what it was doing to their family, what it was doing to her country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with the losses that she experiences, and also then how her view of God is shattered. She ends up with I will have her having a real faith crisis. Is how
A real
she said.
faith crisis.
Real faith crisis.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Who do you see as your target audience for your books?
Well, I didn't get into this for publishing. I got into this to tell a story, and I think basically, I think for today's world, what I see a lot of people having gone through one type of faith experience, but yet does it really work anymore in today's, what people are facing today? Is it really working? And so that's what I guess I'm trying to work through, and that I'm working through with her as well,
Okay.
And does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In other words, it's really, if you got into that audience, it's looking for that struggling with either asking the question about their faith or
Yeah, and that's where I put this. The one I'm working on now, I've quit it several times because I said I have a book with no real story. To say it that way, but really, it's basically the intrigue, the struggle. Her struggle is what it's about, telling it from a woman's perspective is difficult for me, and so I,
Why did you choose a woman's perspective?
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I know why. Yeah, I know why. Because if you're looking for stories from a man's perspective from Germany in World War I, they're all over the place. All Quiet on the Western Front. I mean,
right.
And so the trenches. I mean, all and the horrors of that. But from a woman's perspective, when her husband is sent to war, it's leaving her with 2 kids, and then also what the German people also had to endure, for the craziness of this stupid war, and her own faith struggle is, here you have Catholics, Episcopalians, Lutherans, and they're all enemies, and how can you say? And then the church itself is pretty irrelevant, at that time,
Right.
So all of that. So that's where she's struggling. So I tell her from that perspective because of that reason, and also then her living, the inflation, the lack of food, et cetera, et cetera. So to basically tell the story from her perspective of what she had to endure, and as well. So I to tell it from a man's point of view would have had him basically in the trenches.
Right.
And I have some of that, but yeah, there's a lot out there for that if you go digging for it.
Right.
A lot of guys who lived through the war, fighting for the German cause, have written.
Right.
So theirs would be more realistic than anything
from her point of view.
Yeah,
I do
at
like
least
that.
I'm trying to write from her perspective.
Right. I like that. I like that a lot. I'm interested.
Yeah, that's
now. All right. So how far are you through this book?
I'd say at least half.
Okay.
At least half. But what makes me more confident now is that I have a more clear direction to how I'm going to get to where I want to go.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So if we want to buy this book, how do we get it?
Amazon.
Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's let's take a look again. We have Of Love and Loyalty. We can get that on Amazon. Oops, here we go. Of Love and Loyalty. We can get that on Amazon. And then the next book will be coming out in about a year.
Yeah, I'd say a year.
Okay. Yeah. And thank you so much, Barry, for being on our show.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
We've loved it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You made me think about stuff too.
Oh,
I appreciate
good.
that. Yeah, right.
Good.
No, really.
I love
appreciate it.
thinking
Yeah.
people.
Well, Gael, thank you
Yes.
for being here.
Bob, thank you for being here.
No. Well, thank you.
Mark, thank you
No.
for being here.
Thank
We
you.
have an audience in the back.
Yes.
We
thank
have
you.
Greg and my wonderful, charming husband, Ralph. Thank you for tuning in to Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips, resources, and your favorite conversation. Our next guest will be Jim Harper, and we will be chatting about his website and company, harpersbazaar.com. Till then, see you around the inkwell.
I'm looking for this inkwell.
Keep looking.